Tom Blackwood knelt in the dirt as dawn broke over the ranch. His weathered hands pressed against the freshly turned soil of Margaret's grave. 6 months, and the pain hadn't dulled. The morning breeze carried the scent of coming rain across the open pasture, rustling through tall grass that needed cutting. Margaret would have reminded him about that. He pulled the gold band from his finger, the same ring she'd slipped on 43 years ago. The metal caught the first light of day, gleaming briefly before he pressed it into the earth at the head of her grave. "I don't know how to do this without you, Maggie," he whispered, his voice rough from disuse. "I don't know if I want to." Tom pressed the dirt over the ring, patting it flat with trembling fingers. Something about burying that circle of gold felt right. It belonged with her, not on his hand where it only reminded him of what he'd lost. He stood slowly, joints protesting. The wooden cross he'd carved himself stood stark against the sky. Tom touched it once, then turned away. Behind him, the wind stirred the soil where his ring lay buried. The ranch house sat 100 yards away, paint peeling at the corners, porch steps sagging where he'd meant to fix them last spring. Before the diagnosis. Before everything changed. Inside, the silence pressed against him. Tom moved through the kitchen, avoiding the chair where Margaret always sat, the coffee mug she'd used every morning still upturned on the drying rack. He'd never put it away. Some things he couldn't bring himself to change. The cattle needed feeding. The fences needed mending. Life demanded he keep moving even when he saw no point to it. Tom's routine had narrowed to these simple tasks. Feed the animals. Check the fences. Avoid the empty bedroom. Avoid the photographs on the walls. Avoid remembering how Margaret's laugh used to fill every corner of this place. He remembered their first spring here, Margaret planting wildflowers along the drive. "This place needs color, Tom," she'd said, dirt smudged across her cheek. He kissed that smudge, tasting sunshine and soil on her skin. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Tom steadied himself against the kitchen counter, breathing hard until the moment passed. Outside, clouds gathered overhead, matching his mood. The first drops of rain hit the tin roof as he made his way to the barn. The horses nickered softly as he entered, the familiar smells of hay and leather wrapping around him. This was easier, caring for animals that needed him, that didn't remind him of her at every turn. As evening approached, Tom found himself in the attic, sorting through boxes he'd been avoiding for months. Margaret's things. Her winter sweaters. Her books. Her collection of seashells from their one trip to the ocean, 20 years ago. At the bottom of a cardboard box, beneath old Christmas cards and receipts, he found an envelope. His name written in Margaret's flowing script. The paper had yellowed with age. Tom sat heavily on the dusty floor, holding the envelope like it might crumble in his hands. With careful fingers, he opened it. The letter was dated June 12, 1978. Early in their courtship. "My dearest Tom," it began. "Today in the garden, I watched a butterfly land on a rose, and I thought of you. How something so beautiful could emerge from something so ordinary. That's what your love has done for me. It's transformed everything. I believe love like ours never truly dies. It returns to the earth and grows again, like the roses that bloom year after year." Tom's vision blurred. He remembered that summer, remembered Margaret in her yellow dress, surrounded by the roses she'd planted behind her parents' house. That night, as rain pounded against the roof, Tom made his decision. He would bury his wedding ring at her grave, not as a gesture of letting go, but as a promise. Their love would return to the earth, just as she had written all those years ago. The storm intensified as he dug a small hole at the head of her grave. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his solitary figure. The rain soaked through his jacket, plastering his gray hair to his forehead, but he didn't stop until the ring was buried, his final connection to her hidden beneath the soil. "Grow something beautiful, Maggie," he whispered, then turned and walked back to the empty house. Morning came with startling brightness. Tom woke to sunlight streaming through curtains he'd forgotten to close. For a moment, just a moment, he reached across the bed for Margaret before remembering. He made coffee in silence, watching the pot fill with the bitter black liquid that never tasted right anymore. Through the kitchen window, he could see the hill where Margaret lay. Something looked different. Something. Tom abandoned his coffee, striding across the yard, up the gentle slope to the grave. He stopped short, his breath catching in his throat. Around the wooden cross, in a perfect circle, bloomed roses. Deep red, vibrant pink, soft yellow, colors Margaret had loved. They formed a ring around her grave, as if they'd been growing there for years, not hours. But that was impossible. Tom knelt, touching one velvety petal with a shaking finger. Real. Absolutely real. The roses stood tall and healthy, their stems green and strong, their blooms open to the morning sun. Where his wedding ring had been buried, a single white rose grew, its petals tinged with gold at the edges. "Margaret," he whispered, though he knew there would be no answer. Throughout the day, Tom found himself returning to the grave. Between feeding the cattle and repairing a broken fence post, he would walk up the hill, just to make sure the roses were still there, that he hadn't imagined them. Each time, they remained, swaying gently in the breeze. Each time, he stayed a little longer, sitting beside them, sometimes talking to Margaret as if she could hear him. "Remember when we first moved here?" he said to the empty air. "That old farmhouse with the leaky roof. You said we could make it beautiful, and I thought you were crazy." He laughed softly. "You were right, though. You were always right about those things." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land, Tom noticed something nestled among the roses. He reached carefully between the thorns and pulled out a photograph, its edges worn but the image clear. Margaret on their wedding day, holding a bouquet of roses that matched the ones now growing around her grave. Her smile radiant, her eyes fixed on someone out of frame on him, Tom realized. On the man he had been, young and strong and certain that life would always be as perfect as that moment. He turned the photograph over. In Margaret's handwriting, "The roses from our wedding. I'm planting them behind the house. A circle of love that will grow with us." Tom's hands trembled. He remembered now. Early in their marriage, Margaret had taken cuttings from her wedding bouquet, nurturing them into bushes that bloomed behind their house for years. When they'd moved to the ranch, the roses hadn't survived the transplant. Margaret had been heartbroken. "I'll get you new ones," he'd promised. But work and life had gotten in the way, and somehow he never had. Now here they were, the same roses, the same colors, growing in a perfect circle around her grave. Tom pressed the photograph to his chest, tears flowing freely down his weathered face. Not tears of grief this time, but of wonder, of recognition. The next morning, Tom woke before dawn. He dressed carefully, putting on the blue shirt Margaret had always liked. In the kitchen, he made 2 cups of coffee out of habit, then poured one down the sink with a sad smile. The roses seemed to glow in the early light as he approached the grave. Tom settled himself on the ground beside them, wincing at the stiffness in his knees. "I found the photograph," he said. "I remember those roses now. You loved them so much." He touched one of the blooms gently. "I should have planted new ones for you. I'm sorry for that, Maggie. I'm sorry for a lot of things." He spent the morning there, talking to her, remembering aloud the life they'd shared. The birth of their son, now living across the country with his own family. The drought of '93 that nearly cost them the ranch. The Christmas Margaret had surprised him with the saddle he'd admired but couldn't afford. "I miss your voice," he told the roses. "I miss your laugh. I miss the way you'd hum when you were cooking." His voice broke. "I miss everything about you." As days passed, the roses thrived. Tom began caring for them, watering them when rain was scarce, carefully pruning dead blooms. The circle remained perfect, unbroken. Word spread in the small community. Neighbors drove by slowly, some stopping to offer condolences they hadn't expressed before. Tom accepted their awkward sympathy with quiet dignity, neither confirming nor denying the whispered stories about the miraculous roses. His son called more frequently now. "Dad, people are talking about some roses at Mom's grave," he said one evening. "Are you okay out there?" "I'm fine, David," Tom replied, watching the sunset paint the roses gold. "Your mother always loved roses." "I know, but hey, they're just roses, son." But they weren't just roses. Tom knew that. They were something more, something he couldn't explain but could feel in his bones. As the anniversary of Margaret's death approached, Tom found himself at a crossroads. The roses had given him purpose, a reason to get up each morning. Caring for them felt like caring for a piece of Margaret that remained. But there was also pain in their beauty, in the daily reminder of what he'd lost. Sometimes, watching them sway in the evening breeze, he wondered if he would ever feel whole again, or if part of him would always lie buried beneath the earth with Margaret. The night before the anniversary, Tom sat on the porch, a sheet of paper on his lap. He'd been trying to write a letter to Margaret all evening, the words coming in fits and starts. "My dearest Margaret," he'd written, "tomorrow marks a year without you. A year of silence where your voice should be. A year of emptiness where your warmth should fill our home." He paused, pen hovering over the paper. "The roses are a miracle I don't understand. But then, so is your love. So is every day I got to spend with you." The words flowed easier now, filling the page with memories, with regrets, with love that had nowhere else to go. "I should have told you more often how much I loved you. I should have danced with you in the kitchen like you always wanted. I should have planted those roses years ago. By the time he finished, stars filled the sky, and the letter ran 4 pages long. Tom folded it carefully and slipped it into an envelope. Morning dawned clear and cool on the anniversary. Tom dressed in his good suit, the one he'd worn to the funeral. He combed his hair, noticing how much grayer it had become in just 1 year. He carried the letter up the hill to the grave, where the roses bloomed more vibrantly than ever. Their scent filled the air, sweet and familiar. Tom stood before the wooden cross, letter in hand. He'd planned to read it aloud, but now found he couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. Instead, he knelt and began to read silently, his lips moving with the words. As he reached the final page, his voice returned, quiet but steady. I don't know if I believe in heaven, Maggie. You know I was never sure about those things. But I believe in you. I believe in what we had. And if these roses are your way of telling me you're still here somehow, then I'm listening. Tom placed the letter among the roses, tucking it gently between the stems. As he did, he noticed something glinting in the soil. Carefully, he brushed away the dirt. His wedding ring. Somehow unearthed, the gold band lay nestled among the roots of the white rose. Tom stared at it, then slowly picked it up. It was warm to the touch, as if it had been lying in the sun rather than buried in the earth. For a long moment, Tom held the ring, turning it over in his fingers. Then, with deliberate movements, he slipped it back onto his finger. It fit perfectly, just as it had for 43 years. I'll keep wearing it, he said softly. For both of us. As summer faded into fall, the roses continued to bloom, defying the changing seasons. Tom spent less time at the grave now, though he still visited daily, bringing fresh water and speaking quietly to Margaret about his day. The ranch began to show signs of renewal. Tom repainted the porch steps, fixed the sagging roof on the barn, planted winter wheat in the south field. He invited his son and his family for Thanksgiving, the first holiday he'd be willing to celebrate since Margaret's passing. One evening, as the first hint of frost touched the air, Tom sat on the porch watching the sunset. From his seat, he could see the hill, the wooden cross, and the circle of roses glowing in the fading light. A sense of peace settled over him, not erasing his grief but existing alongside it. Margaret was gone, and that would always hurt. But something of her remained, in the roses that shouldn't exist, in the memories that filled every corner of the ranch, in the love that had shaped his life. Tom smiled, a small, bittersweet expression. He would never understand how a buried wedding ring could grow into a circle of roses overnight. Some mysteries weren't meant to be solved. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded him of Margaret's favorite roses. In the growing darkness, the flowers seemed to emit a soft light of their own, a beacon on the hillside. Tom watched until the stars emerged, until the roses were just shadows against the night sky. Then he stood, his joints protesting less than they had a year ago, and went inside the house that no longer felt quite so empty. Behind him, the circle of roses stood unbroken, swaying gently in the night breeze. A testament to love that had returned to the earth and grown again, just as Margaret had written all those years ago. A love that, like the roses, would continue to bloom through all seasons, defying the natural order of things, beautiful in its impossibility. And in the center of that circle, beneath the wooden cross, the soil remained rich and dark, nurturing roots that reached deep into the earth where Margaret rested, where a gold ring had been buried and a miracle had bloomed, where grief had transformed, not into absence, but into something new, something that, like the roses, would continue to grow.